By 2026, the US-China trade war will no longer be just about tariffs, trade deficits, or who can shout louder at a press conference. Because what we are really watching is a deeper strategic contest between force and adaptability, between control and redirection, and between the side trying to block movement and the side quietly building new routes around the blockage. Most people will look at the headlines and think this is a simple fight. One side raises tariffs, the other retaliates. Markets react, companies complain, and politicians pretend they planned the whole thing all along. Because apparently, that is what passes for strategy now. But if you look at this through the lens of 奇门遁甲, the more useful question is not who wins in the childish sense, but which side is better positioned to use the pressure of the moment. The public story is easy to understand. The United States wants to slow China's rise, especially in technology, manufacturing, semiconductors, green energy, and critical minerals. So it uses tariffs, restrictions, and supply chain pressure to make China's path more expensive and more difficult. China, on the other hand, does not respond only by fighting head-on. While it complains publicly and retaliates where necessary, it also redirects trade, strengthens alternative markets, builds domestic capabilities, and expands relationships outside the American-controlled system. And this is where the real strategy begins. Because in Chi-Men, a battle is not won simply by being stronger. It is won by understanding position, timing, and direction, and by ensuring your method matches the terrain. Before we even touch Chi-Men, let's look at the obvious battlefield. By 2026, tariffs and trade restrictions will have already changed the behavior of global businesses, and companies will no longer ask only where goods are cheapest. They will ask where supply chains are safer, where political risk is lower, and where they can still move goods without being trapped by the next policy announcement. That matters because the old model of globalization was built on efficiency, but the new model is being built on security, redundancy, and leverage. In plain English, the world is no longer just asking, where can I make this cheaper? It is asking, where can I make this without being held hostage? That one question changes everything. For America, the strategy is to pressure China by making access harder. For China, the strategy is to reduce reliance on access to the US by building alternative channels. And if you understand strategy, you already know those are not the same game. One side is trying to block, the other side is trying to route around the blockage. If we use Chi-Men language carefully, the United States in this kind of analysis can be represented by a strong attacking force. In symbolic terms, this resembles gang metal because gang represents hard metal, force, obstruction, weapons, and confrontation. That fits the tariff strategy very well. It is visible, it is forceful, it sends a message. It tells the other side, you cannot pass through here without paying a price. And to be fair, this kind of strategy can work when the opponent has no alternative route. But that is also the weakness. Gang metal is powerful but not subtle. It cuts, blocks, and pressures, but it does not naturally adapt. So when America uses tariffs as its main weapon, the move may cause pain. Still, it reveals the limitations of brute force. If the other side can redirect around the blockage, the weapon becomes less decisive over time. This is where many people misread power. They think power is the ability to hit hard, but in strategy, power is the ability to achieve your objective. And if the objective is to stop China's rise, then the real question is not whether tariffs hurt China, because they do, but whether they actually stop China from adapting. That is a very different question. China's response is more interesting because it does not rely only on direct retaliation. It uses complaints publicly, retaliation selectively, and redirection structurally. That means while the world watches the loud arguments between Washington and Beijing, China is also building new trade corridors, pushing exports into alternative markets, expanding regional influence, strengthening domestic supply chains, and moving faster into areas where it wants long-term independence. This is where the Chimen idea becomes useful. In Chimen, the strongest move is not always the most visible move. Sometimes the stronger position is the one that looks empty, quiet, or indirect, because the opponent wastes energy attacking the obvious target while the real movement happens elsewhere. This is why I would not say China is sitting in the void unless I have the exact Chimen chart in front of me, because that would be technically irresponsible, and we are trying not to behave like internet astrologers who throw mystical terms at a wall and call it insight. But strategically, the pattern is very similar to a void style response. You allow the opponent to attack one visible channel while your actual expansion moves through another channel. That is not a weakness, that is redirection. If Gen metal represents force, then Ding fire gives us a different kind of intelligence. Ding is not the blazing sun, it is controlled fire. It is the lamp, the signal, the spark, the coded message, the intelligence network, the quiet flame that keeps walking when everyone else is distracted by the big fire outside. In a trade war context, this is a powerful symbol because the real contest is not just about tariffs. It is about information, networks, alternative routes, diplomatic relationships, logistics, digital systems, energy security, and who can keep moving when the official road is blocked. That is where China's strategy becomes much more subtle. While the US applies pressure through visible policy, China seeks to keep the flow alive through less obvious channels. Not because it is invincible, not because it has no weakness, but because it understands that in a long game, survival does not come from winning one argument. It comes from maintaining momentum. And movement is the thing many Western commentators underestimate. They look at the decline in China-US trade and assume China is losing ground. But they miss the shift toward other regions, partnerships, and layers of influence. That is the mistake. They are watching one door close. They are not watching how many side doors are opening. So who wins the US-China trade war in 2026? The blunt answer is this: nobody wins cleanly. This is not a boxing match where one fighter falls and the other raises his hand. This is a long strategic contest where both sides pay a price, but the side that adapts faster gains the advantage. America can still hurt China. China can still pressure America. Both can damage each other. But the player with stronger adaptability, stronger alternate routes, and stronger long-term execution has the better strategic position. And from the pattern we are seeing, China's advantage is not that it avoids pressure. Its advantage is that it keeps converting pressure into redirection. That is the important distinction. If America's strategy is to block China, then China's counter strategy is to make the blockage less relevant over time. And if that works, then the tariff war does not stop China. It forces China to become less dependent on the system America is trying to control. That is the part most people miss. So the real lesson from Chimen is not China wins and America loses, because that is too simplistic and frankly a bit childish. The real lesson is that force alone is not strategy. A strong attack can create pressure, but if the opponent can absorb, redirect, and reposition, then the attack becomes part of their training ground. That is what makes 2026 so important. The Firehorse year does not reward slow reactions, sentimental thinking, or outdated assumptions. It rewards speed, clarity, adaptability, and the ability to move before the old map becomes useless. And whether we are talking about countries, companies, or individual leaders, the principle is the same. If you keep fighting yesterday's battle, you may still look strong on the surface, but the real game has already moved somewhere else. That is why Chimen matters. Not because it gives you a magical answer, but it forces you to ask a better question. Where is the real movement? Where is the hidden route? And who is adapting faster than everyone else can see? If this way of looking at geopolitics makes sense to you, follow the channel and join the Destiny Architect Telegram chat, because that is where we go beyond headlines and look at timing, structure, and strategy before the noise catches up.